Hey, commitment alert.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Culkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Whether you're watching me on YouTube or wherever you like to download your podcast, we are free, and I really do appreciate your support. Do me a favor and show your appreciation. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up and become a subscriber because it's free. So just hit that red subscribe button. And because Locked On USC comes at you 5 times a week with all of your news and notes and info, hit the bell notification button. That way you don't miss an episode. I also need you to get out your calendars and mark down these dates. Hope I got your attention. On July 9th, modern-day defensive back Zabien Brown. This coming Sunday, after July 4th, he's going to make his intentions known. One of the top defensive backs in the country is going to choose between USC and Alabama. Well, this is what you wanted, Trojan fans, right? Recruiting wars, best of the best. Well, when you're competing against the best for the best recruits, even the ones from Southern California, you have to anticipate not hearing your name called. In this case, I think USC might have, we'll call it the hometown edge. I'm not sure how many times Zabien has been to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, but unofficially, by just counting, he's been at USC's campus at least 8 times. And I know when no one's looking, he's been there a lot more. Trust me. He's been to SC's campus. He's been on SC's campus more than 8 times, and definitely a lot more than Alabama out there in Tuscaloosa. Now, according to the On3 recruiting prediction machine, the RPM, USC stands as a heavy favorite. In fact, 87.9% chance USC is going to get that commitment. Remember, they're going up against Nick Saban, Alabama. Nick is considered one of the best defensive back guru coaches in the country. He's been doing it for a long time. So, if you're trying to decide, fans, if you're trying to figure out, which way is he leaning? Well, let's use Zabien's own words. And he said this following his official visit to Alabama back on June 23rd. Quote, "It's really Alabama and USC," Zabien told Bama Online's Joseph Hastings. "I really loved Ohio State when I went out there, but from my personal standpoint and my personal takeaways, it has a lot of similarities to USC. It was too similar to USC, and I couldn't see myself going across the country for something in my own backyard." End quote. So, just talking out loud, talking to you, the audience, wouldn't that same argument apply if he's considering heading off to Alabama? And like I said, yeah, I get the whole Nick Saban appeal. But, why be the... Here, I'm going to throw a little guilt at Zabien if he happens to catch this episode of Locked On USC. If he doesn't, someone out there, make him aware of the show. He might enjoy it. I'm gonna use this analogy. Why be the one elite defensive back from Southern California to leave the state? Remember, USC, they've already hooked Marcellus Williams, Dakota Fields, Marquise Gallegos. Here's the analogy. Remember the Long Beach Poly 5? If you follow recruiting, you know what I'm referring to. There were 4 guys who joined USC. And then tight end Mercedes Lewis was that 5th guy. He marched to the beat of his own drummer. He went off to UCLA. He had a really successful career. but Zabien. Don't ruin your life. I'm kidding. And go to Alabama. It's the same concept. When you see everybody staying home and going to USC, and you said, why go across the country when there's so many similarities? Well, stay home. I think if we're reading the tea leaves and we use Zabien's words and we look at the defensive class that USC is recruiting, and let's give a hat tip to Dante Williams, because he's known these guys for a long time. And that relationship is starting to pay off now, as you can see, the guys who are committing. And one other note that I would point out to Zabien Brown, he'll actually get the chance to play with Damani Jackson at USC. I'm not sure if they played on the field together at Mater Dei. If you remember, Damani suffered that ACL injury, and that's kind of when Zabien kind of stepped up. That's what you hate to use the whole Wally Pip thing, but next man up. And Zabien showed why he's considered one of the top cornerback prospects in the country. So that's one of the local elite guys that USC's been waiting on. Here's the other commitment date. Mark your calendar. Excuse me. The other guy is KVA, a.k.a. Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa, the linebacker from Bosco. Yep. Kyngstonn tweeted out the day before Independence Day, on Monday, that on July 23rd, he's going to end his journey and make either USC, Ohio State, or Notre Dame fans happy. Well, I actually added that last part about making fans happy, because all he tweeted out was he's going to end his recruiting journey. And he's going to pick a school, and he's going to let his faith guide him. When USC pulled in Celis Williams, I think everyone knows that those two are really tight, Kyngstonn and Marcellus. So that gave Viliamu-Asa something else to think about. But this is still going to come down to what Kyngstonn feels is best for Kyngstonn. And it's a three-way battle. It's between SC, Ohio State, Notre Dame. But I think it might be a USC versus Notre Dame battle. For this reason, Kyngstonn is a very spiritual young man. Notre Dame is a very spiritual place. And it also plays a pretty good brand of football out there in South Bend, Indiana. I know that's hard for USC fans to want to admit. They are our number one rival. However, there's a reason why we respect that tradition and that rivalry, because they play a really good brand of football. And when USC played Notre Dame for the first time way back in the 1920s, that's what put USC on the map. At least nationally. But those are the things that Notre Dame offers. Great academic institution, great place to play football. But Kingstonn's also looking at life after football, and they've got a really good, strong alumni network. So USC might not have that South Bend fall campus feel, with the leaves are turning, which is beautiful, by the way. But what USC does have to their advantage is it's closer to home. And he also knows that following his official visit to USC, maintaining his faith is not going to be an issue if he goes to USC. I'm going to use what Kyngstonn said from one of his quotes from his trip to USC. Quote, "One of the biggest highlights came Sunday morning at Coach Riley's house. We ate breakfast, all the coaches came out, and they brought their families. We ate breakfast together, and then we had a little Bible study. That was definitely a highlight," end quote. So, the last time USC and Notre Dame went head-to-head for a big-time linebacker, and there's been others since the Manti Te'o USC battle. But this one really stands out along the same lines. If you are a follower of this show, Locked on USC, and of wearesc.com, then you know I do a weekly podcast show called Inside the Trojan Huddle. This week, me and the panel, we were goofing around on the show. We were talking about the whole Manti Te'o recruiting situation with USC and Notre Dame, and we also brought up Jimmy Clausen. So there was a couple of girlfriend jokes. So when you're done making Locked on USC your first listen, sometime this week, make sure you check out Inside the Trojan Huddle. I thought it was a really good episode. Fun show. Now, so I'm not sure how any USC fan can be mad if USC doesn't get Kyngstonn, because the Trojan staff went all out. They did everything humanly possible to convince Kyngstonn that coming to USC is not going to be a risk. I mean, they covered every angle. I mean, they even pulled out the Troy Polamalu card to try and, throw a little guilt on there. So now we basically are going to wait 20 days, roughly, depending on when you're watching this episode. And let's be honest, this would sting if he chose Notre Dame or Ohio State over USC. With that said, I think USC is going to go 2 for 2 in July. I think they're going to get both players. I don't think Zabien wants to be that odd man out. He wants to be a part of perhaps one of the greatest defensive back classes in a long time. I'm not just talking about at USC. I'm talking about nationally. So we'll see. Again, and then if we were going to go 2 for 2, Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa. Be that linebacker from Bosco. Come and join the fray. I know USC wants you. When you want the number 1 linebacker in California, you go to Bosco, you go to Mater Dei, you go get them wherever they're playing. But when you want the number 1 sports book in America, you got to head on over to FanDuel. Because baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on all the action than FanDuel, America's number 1 sports book. If you are a new customer, take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball at FanDuel, and you're going to get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20, and you're going to land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything, from the money line to the over and under. Who do you think is going to hit the first home run of the game? You can bet on that too. And you can do that all on an app that's super safe, super secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, they're going to pay you instantly. There is no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than at FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, everydayers, I need to make sure you check out the next episode of Locked on USC. I will have one for you because we come at you 5 times a week. Not sure yet, but I always come up with something interesting to keep your attention for 20 to 30 minutes a day. Make sure you come back. So we're going to stick with, we're going to stay on the recruiting front. As you can see, I've got, in this segment, I'm talking about the last 5 must-get recruits, in my opinion, for the 2024 cycle. Now, while I'm recording this episode of Locked on USC on July 3rd, defensive line rush and Marquise Lightfoot, he picked Miami over USC and Ohio State. He verbally committed to the Hurricanes. And as if you everydayers have been watching the show, I kind of told you that's where he's leaning. But USC is still in it for a few of the really elite defensive line guys. So we're hoping that at least a couple of them, they want to play alongside David Palipali, who became USC's 17th commit in the 2024 class. He is USC's only defensive line commitment so far. But as a reminder to everyone who is white-knuckling it, saying we need more defensive line guys, we do. You're right. But it's not as dire as you might think it is. Don't forget, USC brought in a couple of really good young guys who were just freshmen last year that are going to be available this year. You might recognize the names Anthony Lucas, Bear Alexander. So all is not, just, everything is not bad. And we just entered July, so let's see what happens. But if you had to pick 5 guys to close out the class with, who's going to be on your list? Okay. Right now, as I mentioned, USC has 17 commits. You know that Lincoln's going to hold a few open spots for any transfers that might pop up, and if he feels that any walk-ons are worthy of earning a scholarship. So here are my top 5 guys to close out the class. And in order, you can, if you want to give me your list, it doesn't have to be in order, just give me your top 5 guys. But here are my guys. Linebacker, Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa. Priority number 1. Taka Curtis was USC's only linebacker recruit in their 2023 class. He was Brian Odom's guy from Jump Street. Laser focused, they didn't go after anybody else. So far, in 2024, USC has got a commitment from Elijah Newby. He's from Connecticut. And right now, he is really considered the only linebacker commit in this class. And he's a good one. But he's not from California. And he's not considered the number 8 linebacker in the 2024 cycle. Or the number 10 overall player in the state of California. Again, Elijah is a very good player. Glad he's going to be a Trojan when he signs his letter of intent in December. But I keep pointing out that part about California. It's relevant, especially when we're talking about the first 3 guys on my list. It's one thing for Lincoln Riley and his staff to cherry pick some of the better players across the country. But keeping the best at home has to be a priority. Especially if we're talking about defensive players for USC. California has enough players annually to keep the Trojans competing on a national level for championships, especially when they have the right coaching staff. And right now, USC seems to have the right coaching staff. I know. What about the defense? Let's give them the second year, okay? I think that's fair. So for the same reason, that USC, it was important for USC to keep Corey Foreman home in that recruiting cycle. The same optics apply here when it comes to the elite players in California, starting with Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa. Same thing applies with Zabien Brown. I mentioned both of these players in our previous segment. They're ready to make their announcements. July 9th for Zabien, July 23rd for Kyngstonn. So, similar to the Bosco boys, keeping that modern day pipeline, keep that thing flowing to USC and not to Alabama, that opens the eyes of future recruits, not just in California, but across the country as well. But especially in California. When those elite recruits see, hey, you know what? My boys are staying home. It's time for me to stay home too. Yeah, they work together. This is what USC has been working against for the last, 5-10 years. Just understand, USC football hasn't been in the same place it's been since Lincoln Riley got here. It's getting back there, and it's getting back there really quickly. So again, there's no reason for players from California to choose Alabama over SC, especially right now. Next guy up on the list, Aiden Breland. I've mentioned him before. Once again, this is an elite defensive player from the state, and he plays for that USC feeder school. And there just aren't a bunch of elite trench players in the state, at least this cycle. So when you get an Aiden Breland or a Jericho Johnson from Northern California, if he makes a visit this summer and shows more interest, he might move up higher on my list. And I understand Aiden hasn't shown a lot of interest in USC. I think there's stuff working behind the scenes. And he did, he was out there in late April at USC. And I don't know, I'm sure he's taken a couple other off-the-record unofficial visits. I'm just not aware of them. So, again, when those players stay home and come to USC, then you'll see other players across the country, the elite players, who are going to say, oh, okay, well, if Aiden Breland can go to any program in the country and wants to go to USC, and Viliamu-Asa is going to do the same, and Zabien Brown, well then, that, like I said, that's going to catch the attention of players like Edric Houston, defensive lineman from Buford, Georgia. USC is battling. Ohio State is probably in the lead. But again, if USC goes 2 for 2 in July with those commitments, I guarantee you, it's going that sound, those kabooms, they're going to reverberate across the country. And why Edric is number 4 on my list? Because those other guys ahead of him are from California. And I mentioned USC already has a couple of young freshmen, redshirt freshmen, defensive linemen they brought in this year. Edric is not a need. He is a distinct desire, a big-time want. He's that far away from a need. Taylor Tatum, number 1 running back. Same rule applies here. USC's running back room is filled to the rim with talent. I mean, Austin Jones, Marshawn Lloyd, that dude's got some hops. Go check out his workout video. He's jumping over hurdles off of 2 feet like he's a bunny rabbit. It shouldn't look that easy. Anyways, back to Taylor Tatum. Back to the USC running back room. Loaded. You got Austin Jones. You got Marshawn Lloyd, Darwin Barlow, 2 elite freshmen out of the state of Texas in Quentin Joyner and Amarian Peterson. And then you've got Taylor Tatum, the number 1 rated running back out of the state of Texas. Again, does USC need him? Absolutely not. Does USC want him? Absolutely. Because when you start pulling in players who are considered the upper echelon at their position group, the Taylor Tatums, the Edric Houstons, nationally, and you get them to come to USC, all of a sudden, from a perception point of view, optics, USC is now, they have the talent, and now all of a sudden the bar has been raised. There's no more excuses. USC is now going to be, and I'm using finger quotes, expected to compete for national championships. So, that's my list. Who are yours and why? I want your feedback. You know where to find me. Use that YouTube channel. Hit me up on Twitter. Oh, and by the way, I should let everybody know, don't forget, July 11th, Tuesday Trojan Club. I'll be out there doing a little meet and greet. It's in San Pedro, Cabrillo Landing. Check it out. Head on over to their Facebook group, Tuesday Trojan Club. Check it out. Get involved. You won't be disappointed. And again, meet and greet. I'll be out there answering some questions, appetizers, drinks. Great networking forum. Look forward to seeing you all out there. So again, who are your must-have top 5 recruits to close out the class? Let me know. So when USC jumps to the big conference in 2024, Trojan fans, you're going to be in for a fan awakening. I guess that's the best way to put this. I've talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to keep coming back to this. And also, it's a slow time of the year, so I'm borrowing this topic from the Inside the Trojan Huddle show that I did earlier in the day. We've been talking about the different stadiums that USC fans and USC is going to visit when they join the conference. And basically the questions have been coming across, when you think of ... what do you think of? So, immediately when I think of the big conference, I think about sold out stadiums, coordinated stadium cheers, college football tradition, passion, and let's be honest, USC fans, Trojan family, a lot of us, not me, but a lot of you, could probably use an IV drip when it comes to matching the big conference's fan enthusiasm. I know what USC fans are capable of. I've seen it on steroids before. So, those Pete Carroll years, they were special. You're getting ready to step back into that realm. One, because USC football and Lincoln Riley is trending that direction. But you're going to be playing some big-time games week in, week out. So, I know that when I make my first trip to Wisconsin, to Camp Randall Stadium, what do you think of when you think about Wisconsin football? Well, when I think of Wisconsin football, this is what I think of. I think of them owning the Rose Bowl, sea of red, especially when they played UCLA, Bruin sellouts. But when we go to Camp Randall, I'm going to think of cold. I'm going to think of how they play football. They run the ball. And then they run it again. And then they run it again. And then all of a sudden, Ron Dane has 2,000 yards, and your defense just does not want to tackle anymore. As I mentioned, when USC makes that first trip, I am going to leave the press box. I want to feel that energy of jumping around. And I don't want the glass between me and the fans. I want to get out there. I want to feel it. I want to feel it reverberate. When you think about Minnesota football, what do you think about, Trojan fans? Now, I'll be honest. Besides the color schemes of both teams being similar, I can't think of a gosh darn thing when it comes to Minnesota Golden Gopher football. I just don't. I mean, it's cold outside in the winter, right? I know they get big mosquitoes in the summertime out there. Here's what I think about when I think of Minnesota. The college, athletics, basketball, the barn. That's on my bucket list. Dave Winfield. He played all 3 major sports. But, again, help me out here, Trojan fans. What else should I know about Minnesota Golden Gopher football? Because I don't know anything. What are their game day traditions? Do they have any? It can't just be row the boat, right? Same question. Last question. When you think of Northwestern football, what do you think about? Obviously, the first thing that probably is going to come to everybody's mind, the 96 Rose Bowl between USC and Northwestern. And that whole David versus Goliath thing. The whole country was rooting for Northwestern. First time they'd been there in, forever. I think since David battled Goliath. But what we all saw was Keyshawn Johnson just going off, thank God, and USC winning probably one of the most exciting Rose Bowls in a long time. Northwestern had a a really good running back. His name was Darnell Autry. But other than that, nah. I know they wear purple. I know it gets windy in Evanston, Illinois, which is close to Chicago, which means pizza. So here's how I look at Northwestern. They're going to have a decent program every now and then. USC is going to lose Stanford. They're going to pick up Northwestern. 2 private universities, 1 for 1. I mean, here's what you need to ask yourself. Is Northwestern a good football school? Well, they're better than They're better than Minnesota. That's all I can tell you. All right. That's it for this episode of Locked on USC. I can't believe it. I actually fit more than 30 minutes of just nonsense. I don't think it was nonsense. Actually, a lot of good information. And I'll have more good information for you on our next episode. So make sure you check it out. But until then, everyone, you know what to do.